Hello and welcome to another, I guess, original format or format attempt for a Madaxeman battle report. This one's from the Beachhead competition, ADLG 200 points, pretty late medieval. I think it was everything after the Battle of Manzikert 1071 that was allowed in terms of lists, so a wide range of lists there. And this format I wanted to, well, basically I didn't take as many pictures as I normally do, so it would have made the normal reports a bit thin. I've also got quite a lot of other reports stacked up with other competitions coming, so I thought it's an opportunity to do something a bit different with this and do a video report that looks a little bit more at the gameplay and a bit less at the tiny little geezers saying very bizarre and odd things to each other and swearing in Flemish and the usual kind of nonsense. So starting with Bournemouth, what I want to do is look at the lists, take you through a lot of the sort of top down photos that I tended to take, and just try and talk about what I was thinking about the game throughout it. Whether that's better or worse, I'm not sure, but it certainly will be different, which is about as much as I can hope for. So what you have here is a beautiful vista of Birmingham from the Birmingham International Centre. We were in a great spot. We could see out to sea. It was light, it was airy. This was in mid-February, so we were just kind of emerging from, oh my God, COVID regulations were over, and people were thinking about, how safe they were and the rest of it, but we were in a bright airy space, so everybody seemed very happy with it, and that worked well. But moving on from these glorious joys of the seaside in Bournemouth, let's have a look at the list that I took, really. And there's a bit of a story to this, so this is a kind of a two-parter. So I'd taken Burgundian Ordonnance. Really, the reason for this was a lot of lockdown painting, in which I'd stripped down and completely redid quite a large Merleton 15mm communal Italian army, which had some lovely, properly proportioned 15mm medieval figures. I think I'd won it at a competition in Greece years and years ago, or no, actually at the Worlds in Rome a long time ago, and never been happy with the painting, and I've redone it over lockdown and managed, in moving it from a DBM army to ADLG, to create all sorts of different things, different troop types for different late medieval armies. And some of those were these mixed spearmen longbowmen which only really appear in this Burgundian Ordnance list. So what I wanted to do was to try and use as many of them as possible, and also try and get some of the longbow, which had been improved in version 4, out. So this is what I ended up with. Actually, the other thing about it was to counterpart or be different to the enormous 38 units of rubbish which I'd taken to the previous competition. So this is a kind of 20 odd units of pretty good stuff in 3 pretty similar commands, really. All of them are based around a couple of shooters. So if you look at the first command, 2 mixed units, and then a pikeman to kind of stiffen them up, to make them 3 or 4 wide, make it much scarier for mounted troops to have a go at them, and then an ordnance knight on foot. So that effectively gives you a 5 wide command that's pretty tough but a little bit vulnerable, in that 4 of those 5 things are mediocre in combat, but the longbowmen can put out some shooting. The handgunners can cover the pikes, of course. So yeah, so this second unit, the competent commander we have here, again 2 more of the mixed units. This has got 2 knights in it, so they can dismount. They're allowed to in this list at any time, so they could become more men-at-arms. The 1 proper pikeman and a crossbowman to screen them. The knights give it a bit of mounted punch, but not much. They're not really operating out of the line, but what they are doing is making that not just a wall of spears. It can be pretty threatening to any sort of medium foot coming at it. And then the final one, bit of a mess really. 2 more of the mixed units, 2 longbowmen who are medium swordsmen. That becomes the rough terrain force for what it's like, but it does mean this puts out 4 frontage of shooting. And then a kind of very half-hearted 1 heavy cavalry impact, 1 light cavalry crossbow, 1 light cavalry impact. That's really to try and run around the flank of a smaller medieval army and try and sack the baggage and cause threats. It's not really going to stand up to any cavalry in its own right, and a little light infantry crossbow to do that. So this was the list I submitted and had approved, and then and got through. The the only problem was that it found out after the competition that it was slightly dubious, in that I'd misread a list note about the mixed units in which you swap 2 bowmen and 1 pikeman for 2 mixed units, and I'd missed that note. So there is too many mixed units / pikemen / longbowmen here. So I tweaked the list afterwards to try and tweak it as little as possible, which essentially means one of the mixed units comes out of the 1st and the 3rd command and gets swapped in for a crossbow per piece. So it's still putting out shooting, it's still difficult to shoot, it's still a bit flaky in combat, but the army size does go up a smidge as well, through a fortified camp. So this was kind of my minimum change to it, to make this list legal. Hopefully it wouldn't have made too much difference, but because again, it's still the same principle: stick out a lot of shooting. Hopefully you damage the enemy before they get in, because a lot of your stuff, before it was mediocre spearmen, now it's crossbow with pavis and a slightly bigger breakpoint with fortified camp. And I think in hindsight, which I didn't do when I was changing this minimum change list, as the notes say here, I might be tempted to drop the fortified camp, because and make a commander brilliant, probably the 3rd one, as I did quite often find they had a little bit too much to do with a competent commander and one command with about 7 different units, all of which do different things, to try and drive on. But yeah, if you can imagine that what you see here is this one rather than the other one, and some of the spearmen are crossbow, that's pretty much the same. So let's roll on to look at the very first game. So this was against a 100 Years' War English army. So you've got pretty textbook table. I think someone's narrowed it down with a waterway. There's a few fields, there's a hill, there's a marsh which protects part of my flank, and here you can see my army obviously in the foreground, how small it actually is, although on this table, which I was almost playing on barely half of it, it still had room to fit some reserves in. And this sort of formation was pretty typical for the weekend. The longbowmen on the left hand side, operating with the cavalry in that command, they are expecting to find some sort of rough going on there and become my rough terrain troops. And in this medieval period, I wasn't expecting to find too much there. The cavalry can potentially drift around that flank, and then you're just setting up fairly defensively in the middle, actually, with a wall that is of mixed shooters, the pikemen, the Flemish pikemen, the foot knight, and it's really just saying, come and have a go, and we're going to put out a lot of shooting as you come in, and hopefully, despite the fact that we're a bit subpar in combat, if we can knock you down a hit pretty much along the line with repeated shooting from longbows and crossbows, that may well net it out, and then possibly a reserve of knights or whatever, that will do it. So over in the distance you've got the English army, that again is a very, very small army. This was a mix of men-at-arms, crossbowmen, longbowmen, and a few knights in the middle. They set up in the middle, and I guess with nothing to anchor their flanks on, looking back at the previous thing, and me obviously being kind of in this corner here, the idea was that they would come forward or be encouraged to come forward, and that's pretty much what they did. Bit of a gap over there on that flank. So here you can see that plan of mine in action. The longbowmen are now ready, heading for the field, and I've used some extra pips to just throw the 2 light horse forwards and through that field, and already they're behind the flank of the longbow. But the whole army is actually wider than the English on this side. The English don't really have a great deal to go through this terrain, and they've set up fairly centrally. So this end of the line versus these 2 guys is clearly something that's looking likely to be key to my plan. Let's have a look actually at that list. Again, it was very, very simple, very straightforward. I think it's the chap's first game or first competition game. I think he played a few more games, and hopefully first of many. And it's a very straightforward army to use in the medieval period. It does what it says on the tin. Longbowmen, men-at-arms, mounted knight, longbowmen, men-at-arms, crossbow, longbow, and then some light foot and knights. It's small, it's tidy, it's all good quality. It's going to do what it says on the tin, and its risk is that it's, again, potentially a little bit small, but in some ways it's quite similar to mine, but without those kind of handful of cavalry, really, and just a smidge narrower. So as the game's kind of developed, the English have come forward, but those fast-moving longbow sword have rushed in, claimed the rough terrain with no opposition really, and are immediately threatening the end of that line. But what we have here is really just sort of an exchange of shooting, and a lot of all my shooters have got protection of 1 because they're spearman longbow, or in the revised list one of them would be crossbow pervice, and there's some men at arms here, this one in the end and another one here, and the rest of those shooters are protection 0 because most of them are actually longbow or longbow stakes and crossbowmen. So there's a slight advantage there, but this heavy infantry is a little bit dangerous, but there's a knight sat here in the middle of the line, but really the action's here, and you can see some of the knights are being drawn over to deal with the light horse who are over on this flank, and this picture shows it a little bit better in the next round really. So the light horse are here, they can't be ignored, otherwise they'll just march up and have the baggage or be in the back. That's drawn off knights who in an ideal world I guess would be thickening this line and countering my knights, but they have to deal with these extra supplemental light horse. The man at arms has sort of spun out to face this flank attack. He can't ignore it, so he's just taking it. And what I've decided to do, even though that's men at arms, I've done some shooting on it with 1-2 longbowmen plus another one here are all able to concentrate on it. So I've knocked a hit off it, which means even though they're heavily armoured and they may have been elite as well, sheer weight of numbers, I've got a couple of overlaps here. The longbow swordsman or the swordsman longbow have gone in just to say if this goes, we've got a good opportunity, 2 overlaps, and then that does start to put a huge problem for the rest of the line very quickly. And again, a little kind of spare crossbowman is already coming around here as well to give the +1 for extra shooting against some of these guys, and you can see the hit points starting to build up there. This is the game a bit more developed from top down. So this exchange of shooting, it is dropping some hits on there. This one's picked up 2 hits, that's picked up a hit. The light foot who is screening my pikemen are starting to take up hits as well, and also I've had to drag this knight who started here all the way over here, putting him pretty much out of command range because my army isn't wide enough. The English are doing the same to me as I'm doing to them over here. They're drifting wider and getting ready to put the people through this marsh. Here, this is my man at arms. Again, I'm just pushing him forward because this is a little bit thin. It's got a couple of light infantry in it, and I don't really want people getting into these pike and overwhelming them with all of these guys. So he can hold up against some medium foot for a while, but this is now starting to do some damage. I've done a bit of lucky shooting here, but I'm looking at this and saying this guy's the important one. These 2 are going to have to run away probably, but he's now out of the game, and it is going to be dominoes down here with some fairly fast moving troops and the knights, while these guys are probably not going to do much more in terms of movement at all. So as predicted, or as I remembered more likely, you've got some longbowmen scooting into the marsh, and you've got the enemy men at arms have engaged my mediocre kind of mixed spear longbowmen. Now this is a bit of a race against time. They are better, and this is a better tactical situation than I have on this end of the line, but I've got a much better situation on the other end of the line. So this is which flank is going to chew which flank up first. So I'm kind of happy. Well, I'm happy that this is happening now after I've already started on the other side. So looking at this, boom, he's gone. The ones behind him have gone. They've been shot at multiple times. They've had someone explode. Just sheer weight of shooting has knocked one away here, and suddenly this guy is completely isolated. Three units have gone round him. As you can see over here, I think I've had a light horse evade off table as the knights have come forward. My impact cavalry are standing just to keep these guys occupied for another couple of turns. It's all about keeping this lot out the way whilst all of this stuff really suddenly starts to clatter into here as quickly as possible. And 2, 4, 6 hit there, 7, a few other bits and pieces. You're starting to get, even just in this picture, close to half of the English army gone and broken. And these fast-moving troops are now in a great position, really. So what's going on here on the other side? We're just sort of shoving stuff in. The Flemish pike are going in to try and take some of the pressure off these guys. And the Flemish pike are going to take a while. They've got 4 hits. These have got 4 hits before they break. They are losing, but this guy's sort of safe. The longbowmen are shooting him, but it's difficult for you or this longbowman to come out of here while this knight's here, even if he's partly intact. So I'm just gumming up 1, 2, 3 men at arms, and I'm stopping them being in a neat formation. And even though there's a risk of this guy going and doing an injury here, what I am gaining is I'm getting an overlap in this combat and an overlap in this combat through that stacked up, and these guys are unable to take advantage of it. And these chaps can't now shoot the pikemen. This guy's become a bit of a arrow magnet, but he can do that because it just stops anybody sweeping through into this big open gap. So I'm happy for this to kind of be gummed up and to lose it kind of slowly, because this is what's happening elsewhere. The longbowmen are racing forward. The spearmen have actually started swinging in as well and doing some more shooting. The knights have been able to burst through, and there's now nothing left here really. We're actually already into chewing up the stuff in the middle, and pretty much half of that army has fallen by the wayside already. Really something that's been engineered by those longbowmen having extra width and being the kings of the rough terrain in a setup in which the English didn't quite know where it was going to go, and deployed probably too much too close to the centre. So just the other end of the table is still closing out. I have finally lost, well, not finally, I quite quickly lost one of these mixed units. No doubt, no wonder, no surprise they're coming through. But this is all about which side is winning on which wing faster, and how can you exploit it. Trying to exploit that with heavy foot men at arms is a lot slower than exploiting it with the faster longbowmen who are coming in all the way from the flank and start from the flank. These guys have got to win to create a flank. The defensive shoulder of the marsh has given my army several bounds of extra security there before anything can really be started to rolling up. So this is pretty much the end game. The knights are starting to come in. They are now chewing up this at a rate of knots. This unit has had to just run out the way. We've just left. This was the second, so obviously pikeman's gone. The second one's in trouble, but this guy is still threatening anybody who comes through. But this lot are all moving up and have been really machine gunning light infantry here, because they've run out of other targets, and you can see pretty much everything from about here on the English army is now gone. It's as soon as they start to lose 1 or 2 bowmen, suddenly I'm able to double up or triple up on shooting, and my guys are more resilient through being Pavis or being in the real world in a real list or heavy infantry as well. So that's just happened a lot quicker than it has on that other side, and it's a tale of 2 speeds really, tale of 2 wings. This one does eventually collapse, but that one has collapsed right up to the middle, and that was pretty much game over. This means war. And that took us into the second game. So here we've got again a fairly bald table on this side. I think all of the terrain is impassable. There's some rough terrain. All the terrain fell over here, which to these 2 heavy metal medieval armies, the opposition being Free Company, classic sort of knights and dismounted knights people, gave them both an obvious place to line up, and this is kind of similar-ish setup. I've got that same Flemish pike and mixed units on that side. The knights this time, yeah, they're in the middle, and then the cavalry and the longbows. The longbows have already found some rough terrain, and they're just sitting there. And it's kind of a gap here, which is a bit awkward. The Free Company are pretty much all knights and men at arms. There's not really the longbowmen in this option, and there's a kind of mounted wing here. So they're heavyweight, but they're not elite. But it's going to be pretty dicey, and if they come forward, I'm looking at this area of the table as where something they don't really have anything to contest these guys or possibly its cavalry. And as long as this mixed unit can get out here quickly enough, that will close the door to these Hungarian horse archers and the knights and cavalry, and create a kind of cavalry proof fence, I guess, here that can start to shoot them and put pressure on them. So again, let's have a look at that list in more detail. So you've got a fairly small command to go out first, the light horse and a couple of knights. That's the faster moving one. Then you've got 4 foot knights in a big block and a couple of heavy infantry, which are poor man's foot knights, I guess. Unreliable general in the middle, of course. And then a big punchy knight command that can or cannot dismount, depending on what he wants to do, with a heavy cavalry outrider as well, and a brilliant general, which is what you see there on the table. So everybody was reliable. This all seemed to work. So with no terrain and not much clever stuff to be done with these two linear armies, it was a case of let's get shooting as quickly as possible. So these couple of formations got out and did start putting enough pressure to force these light horse to drop back in the middle. And it really was just a case of move up and let's take them on, really. And as soon as we could get into shooting range, then the battle starts to see which way it's going to be decided. It's a real question of, can the longbows and what should have been the crossbows in my army do damage? And in fact, crossbows might have even been better here against the heavily armoured foot knights. But can they do enough damage such that when this line of people clatter in, they will be sufficiently wounded that the subpar combat ability here will see them do better. So, and again, this area which I talked about in deployment, the cavalry outriders come round, but it's impact cavalry. It could do a lot of damage to these, but they really can put out a lot of dangerous shooting for it as well. So there's a real chance here. Does a cavalry impact gamble against charging them? How long will this skirmisher last before they start to be able to shoot at him? Can this thing come around and give them support as well? This guy's here, and these guys have, if they peel off a couple of knights to help over here, that's possibly leaving them a bit short-handed against this big line of shooting and spear formation as well. So difficult choices there for those knights. But what they decided to do really was just, again, mirror me and just chase forward. So these are all coming forward. Very little shooting damage here, although very little stuff to shoot at them. But the longbows and what should have been crossbows are doing some quite meaty damage on these knights, hitting them a couple of times. And it's now clear they're coming forward, and actually I prefer to get rid of some of them because I don't want this one in overlap here and a potential gap here as well. That would be pretty much curtains for these guys. We're relatively happy that we're fighting knights rather than men at arms, and my knights are lined up. This is sort of a deployment paper, scissors, stone thing. But what I've done is I pushed the light horse here to make this knight have to react to them, really to do everything I can to make this 4 against 4 as much as I can, and possibly give me the overlap here. So this knight's going to have to react to the Zok. The rest are just coming forward, and the dice god is going to decide at some point. So what's coming on here? See, I've drawn off one of the knights, and the cavalry managed to take a hit. We managed to blow away the light foot, and so the cavalry have gone in, and a bit dicey. They're good against medium swordsmen in the open, but we've got an overlap. They're injured. It's not straightforward. This one that's got 2 hits has decided to wait and hang around. It doesn't want to risk going in. It's actually covering that flank. Now I'm engaged in combat. I can't shoot it anymore. So swings and roundabouts. This one's conceded an overlap, but this one stops me exploiting it particularly much. And here we've got a solid line of combat of normal men at arms against pikemen, mediocre pikemen and knights. And then the other cavalry have gone in as well. And I think this was the point at which I think, looking around the table, I have a strong suspicion that all bar two of our combat units were involved in fighting by about turn 3. So there's a lot of dice about to be rolled here, and this isn't probably as much shooting damage as I would have liked to have done, but at least through putting pressure out by putting these guys in, I managed to draw this formation out a bit, and I've done enough shooting to stall them and make them bottle it really about charging there. So, but this looks like it could have been a lot better. So what happens with combat here? Well, there's very mixed. These ones take 2 hits. They've been beaten, so that's a double, an extra hit as well. But this one that already had taken some shooting dies. This guy's still waiting here. So suddenly this looks pretty gap-toothed, and we can't quite see what's going on over there, but this is pretty gap-toothed. So, but these are still pretty flaky with 2 hits. They can't really take much more, especially with this overlap on both these sides. These pikemen have done some good damage against that footman. Again, these are the heavy infantry turning weapons that could do very well here, but the pikeman's +2 has done better. The included general is making a bit of a dent as well. The knights haven't done well. The knights have been charged into, but they've not really done too much. So I would say after this first round of combat, this is going my way, but there's some scary signs. I think that might even be a 2-hit marker, in fact, not 1. So there's some big holes appearing there potentially. So what happens? Yeah, there's some big holes. That's pikeman gone. That's something else gone. I can't remember what it was. Let's have a quick look if I can remember. Yeah, pikeman and another knight, I think. Yes, pikeman and knight's gone. Suddenly this is a formation of 2. It used to be a formation of 4, and the knights have blown that hole that I was worried about, have suddenly come through and are threatening the flank of this. This is falling apart. But look at all these yellow markers. There's a lot of hits there. The longbowmen look to be okay. There's still some of them left there. We've moved up to try and take on and start shooting some more of these knights. So this is getting pretty bloody, pretty seriously, and a lot of hit markers all the way along the line. But at that point, this was the point at which 2 small armies both kind of staggered in towards each other, and sheer weight of casualties on the smaller Free Company army must have done for them. So nothing really clever or tactical about this. This was just line up, fight, and let's see what happens. And 2 pretty even armies in combat, and I suspect overall I might have wanted or hoped for a better rub of the green on shooting, but in combat I probably came out better all in all, and then just sheer numbers, 20 to 19 or 21 to 20, just about hung on for a victory, which then took us into the one you've just had a quick preview of, the next game, the 3rd game.
This means war.
So this is against the much talked about and completely unusual Albanian army. So if you're looking there, you're probably familiar already then with my setup of mixed units with pikes stiffening up the other guys. I've managed to scatter quite a lot of terrain on table. The Albanians is light foot, light horse, some cavalry, medium impact cavalry, and only a couple of knights and 4 units of crossbow. There's nothing really to get hold of here, and the terrain, I don't really have any of those great anchors. There's no marsh like in the the first game. There's no waterway. The marsh I think ended up over in this corner. So my army hasn't really got much to protect its flanks, and it's pretty obvious that these cavalry are going to come around here. These are going to try and push around here, and if I push too far forward here, some of this stuff will try and sneak through. And that question is, what am I going to kill to win this game? Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like more than a dozen light infantry. So this is a big army. It's like 30 odd. It's or 28 or something. It's getting quite difficult to kill, and I'm sat here thinking this game is here to lose. It's almost impossible to win if the Albanians don't want me to. They can just pull out, and what I might have to do is just be very, very careful not to leave gaps, not to leave opportunities for light foot to sneak through and grab the baggage, or light horse to come through and attack things in the rear, or whatever. And I may even have to resort to trying to shoot the light infantry to try and do some damage before any of the capital troops actually even get into combat. It's a game that I suspect the only thing I can do is either not lose it or lose it rather than winning. So let's look at that. So 2 knights drop out first, and 2 handgunners. Again, they're light foot or elite, a lot of them, which is pretty impossible to kill. 4 javelin, 4 light foot bow, crossbow pavis, and then 4 medium cavalry impact. It's not really punching. The strategist gives them even more initiative. I think they have 6 or 5 or something. And then another command of almost uncatchable, 4 light horse, 5 light foot, and 2 crossbow, and a brilliant general. So they can just dance around however they like. So what happens here? The medium cavalry come whizzing round. The crossbowmen have come up. So immediately, my own light horse are falling back, and this guy's coming out. He's not going to stand up to that for particularly long. But I guess I've got the 2 longbowmen here, longbow sword. They can put out some shooting. They can delay it. They are better than these 2 guys. And here I'm pushing forward to start shooting these light foot and drive them back a little bit, but I'm having to be very careful to leave gaps. And I'm sending a knight over here. So I think in some ways there's almost a thought with this about clearly there is nothing been left in front of me, and there's no intention to fight anything squishy. So part of this is I am going to take some casualties, and the issue is not to take 20 odd before the game time runs out. Driving a knight all the way across here, I'm thinking a knight and the cavalry will, if these guys stay here, they can probably hold off these guys and stop them. As long as they are fighting here against something reasonably good, or even fighting here in the end, if I fall back to this sort of line, what I don't want is them coming all the way around here in a solid block. But I just want to delay combat against these for as long as possible. And already I'm, even though there's no hit markers there, I'm deliberately targeting or trying to concentrate shooting on the light foot, because some of them are going to have to go down, because this lot have just got nothing they're ever going to be able to catch and shoot in combat. So my only thing here is to shoot them. So I've managed to extricate these 2 light horse. Again, one of the weird things in this game is thinking saving every single point that I can, rallying things, putting things out that intact that otherwise I might have let evade off table to buy time for space. I can't afford to lose anybody here. And these guys are just sat here. I wonder how long they'll last. There's potential to come in, but they're tough enough to keep these guys out, and this lot are still trying to shoot away. The knight has pretty much got here. I'm thinking if I can get him and the cavalry and put them 2 or 3 turns away from this block of mediums, it's buying time and space and taking the real proper strike troops for what they're worth out of the game from those, and possibly having a little run at those with the longbowmen. So here they come. They've come round. This guy's just turned and walked away. He's going to set up this defensive line, and the knight has arrived. It's way out of command range, but it's not going to be moving much. It's just going to be saying, do you want to dare attack me? I'm whatever you like. I'm still a heavily armored knight, and you're a medium cavalry. You can be as clever as you like. And the crossbowmen have come forward, and I've stuck some longbowmen into them reasonably unsuccessfully to try and fight them, because that's again possible points, but not committing too many of them. These are still, if this doesn't work, its time can be bought there. Over on this other side, the army is starting to break up a bit. Well, almost completely. There's barely a single group there. But this is just about almost creating a line of stuff that is too dangerous for the light horse or crossbowmen to attack, and using gaps between the units of less than a unit wide to extend that line and just say, look, if you want to take a dismounted knight or a spearman longbow or a pikeman on 1-to-1, fill your boots for a welcome. And the shooting here is, there's a few more hit markers there, and actually these guys are starting to realize they're being targeted and to fall back away from it. But this this is almost feeling like as far as these guys are going to be able to go in this game, because otherwise there'll be gaps and they could be mugged. 2 overlaps is still pretty good. So here, I'm now actually forming this defensive line here. I've left a knight there. He's fighting medium cavalry or light cavalry probably. He's unsupported. He's going to die, but it's going to take him 3 or 4 turns to do it. The cavalry are here. The rest of the knights are coming over from the other flank as well. I've sort of shoved all the rest of the longbowmen in just to gun this whole thing up and try and keep all these guys in this field as much as possible. And these are now turning around again, pulling light infantry out to try and rally them when I can, instead of leaving them to die, because I've just not got many points really in this matchup that I can risk when everything else has got some sort of shooting power. And this is just plugging holes really, and saying, right, we're heavy foot, we're in the open, do you want to dare and come out and go have a go at us? And this line sort of feels like it's as good as it's going to get as well. And that was the point. After a lot of turns and a lot of fiddling about, I was nowhere near getting close to damaging I think it'd say 28 or something, 34 perhaps, of the Albanian army. But through pushing forward as much as I dare, but still keeping a line and plugging things into it and leaving some sacrifices a long way away. I don't mind, in a way, these guys, the longbowmen dying over here, because it ain't here. If it's here, it all falls apart, and then it's just a series of lines that slowly get overwhelmed. But that was always going to be as good as it could get, and that was the end of day 1 actually.
This means war. This means war.
So day 2, one of the things with these late period competitions, you can fight non-medieval armies, and this was a Vijaynagar Kingdom, which is kind of one of the newly hived off Indian armies that appear in the book, which has elite elephants. I think it's elite, or are they armored? But no, they might be elite actually. And it's got these in Nafferton, and then it's got some slightly odd medium cavalry that fill it out, some medium swordsmen who are pretty good in rough terrain, heavy artillery. And always, I guess, a challenge when you've got armies with artillery is you want to use it, and you want to use it to which means you've got to be relatively defensive. So the elephants were sat here, and the gun kind of means, ideally, I'd like to wait here and let the enemy kind of charge me and see if it works, and hopefully it won't against this sort of mix. But they were clearly intent on sitting there, and actually with this stuff protecting this flank, this is the marsh, this is the field, and only some medium cavalry, suddenly this mixed and a pike and a knight kind of looks like it could actually hold quite a lot of that against this. The medium swordsman, a bit more patchy, but there's a lot of shooting here. He's all right. The longbow swordsmen are kind of good as well, and I've got this cavalry to threaten them, which keeps them in the probably a village there, which leaves me with this kind of chunk of stuff in the middle to try and get sufficiently close to the elephant corps to make them attack me, and I can probably do some sort of shuffling around to try and get as good a matchup as or set of things in front of those elephants as I can. So let's have a look at that army. So again, a nice interesting command to drop first: 2 bowmen, 3 medium cavalry. It's like, that doesn't tell you anything, does it? The 4 elite elephants, 2 elite impact swordsmen. They're pretty good. 3 lightfoot incendiary, and then finally 5 medium swordsmen impact. That's taking terrain, and a big gun to sit on a flank. And it is actually set up quite defensively. I think there's ways that you can build this army to go forwards, but that's a pretty solid way of doing it defensively, although 6 elephants and 2 swordsmen can go forward over most things if it so wishes. So this was kind of how it develops. These guys are not moving, they're waiting for me to come and let the gun do as much as it can. And what I'm doing, I'm racing towards the gun as quickly as I can to see if I can get close enough with the light foot that they start taking the shooting, but I'm just living with it with these guys. These guys are coming up. I'm pushing forward with the pike and the mixed units, and I've actually taken one of the mixed units with the pike over here ready to form this block to take on the elephants, and using a pretty, almost draw them in, tempt them in, because this could always still flip out. This will do damage. It's very hard for medium cavalry to take on even one of those things, and particularly when there's knights here, and the knights are just stopping a couple of units of bowmen from those units of bowmen coming out of the terrain, and one of these can always come away because that will still block them, because it's going to be difficult for them to do anything decisive, because actually there's only 3 units there anyway, and if they take any of them on frontally, they're in a lot of trouble. So this looks thin, but that can reinforce that could reinforce that could go forwards. Do these want to come forwards? Is that going to be easier for me to kill if I start shooting them than anything else? Maybe. So here it is. It's started to fighting has almost started to happen. The the cavalry have come in. Some more medium foot have come out of the terrain and are having a go at my longbowmen and my pikemen. But again, it's a little bit thin. There's not quite enough there. This is a big gap that this knight has decided he needs to fill pretty quickly before they get in. I think this is possibly coming across as well, because that suddenly does look like a gap. But here, he's now just waiting. Can this thing turn around and block a couple of those? We've just got to stop them breaking through, and we're already now into shooting range of the elephants, which is going to make the elephants have to come forward. And here, these guys have got a bit stuck on the hill. They can't come forward because of the heavy cavalry, and the longbowmen have stayed here and are now moving into this this fieldy type area and starting to tempt these guys to come and have a fight. So what you've got here, this is what you want fighting elephants. You've got pikemen and you've got spearmen with longbows. Just that classic theory that I'd said right from the start of put something that is brittle but still scary and better than mounted, and especially better than mounted once they start to take a hit from shooting. So these infantry have got a bit distracted. Some are on the hill, some are coming through here, and they've been taking a lot of shooting hits from these 2 longbowmen because they've just not really dared to come forward. So the longbowmen are now hold off these guys. Crossbowmen are running riot. I think the shooting's been pretty deadly here, and we're actually making a run for the gun with the dismounted knights and the pikemen, just to form a real solid line here and start shooting at these guys. So again, that knight's now come in to just block. This is, do we want to beat these? Can we beat these? We're not too fussed. We're happy for this fight to go on for as long as possible, because it's all going to be about what happens here. And off the screen here, there's still a knight holding some longbowmen at bay, and suddenly he's managed to shut the door on these cavalry doing anything too much. So the elephants have kind of come in. They've done some pretty serious damage. There's pikemen gone here. There's spearmen gone here. This is on red. They have smashed quite a big hole in it. But again, there's still hits on those, and there's still some damage being done elsewhere. So my theory hasn't worked particularly well. Elite elephants are still clearly pretty good and are doing some pretty dangerous stuff. But actually, I've fed these elephants 2-3 units. I've got a light foot that's occupying one there to try and stop it doing too much else here. So they've waited, they've launched themselves, they've done damage. Maybe they should have done it sooner, but it's given me a lot of time to try and chew the stuff up at the end. So and I think this was the point, almost the high water mark of the Indian army, because the units over on the flanks had just chewed up enough in, again, what is quite a small army, that by the time the elephants got in and started doing decisive things, the whole army could take relatively few more casualties before it was tipped over, because the non-strike troops had taken quite a bit of punch. So that that takes us into, again, it's just seen the fifth and final game.
This means war. This means war.
Which was against Condottieri with an Albanian ally, and again a tiny textbook classical medieval army. This one with an Albanian ally, which this terrain, same thing I've tried to do. I've cluttered it up with a marsh. I think that might have been a town field here. So no obvious big open flank for the Albanians to come around, and a field here which the longbowmen are going to be playing in. Because again, this army doesn't really, like a lot of medieval armies, have much in the way of rough terrain troops, and a much smaller but better quality set of things here. And what I'm trying to do, I guess, is to close out the Albanians and not allow them to be useful. If I can block them coming through here, that's a lot of points which are not doing something, and then set up a kind of a shooting first battle, a bit like against the Low Countries, sorry, against the Free Company, in which I want to do some damage to these guys before they get in, such that my slightly weaker troops will prevail over in balance. So here it is. I think the other bit that was, I think, hidden in the wood was a couple of full fat Almugavars who are pretty good rough terrain troops, and then a solid, very similar to kind of mine, pike, foot knights, and mounted knight, and the elite spear, and then the Albanian. But I think with the Almugavars, it does end up a little narrow, as you've seen in that picture in the middle, and there's quite a lot, 8 troops and a brilliant general there. If they can be neutralized, it's suddenly looking like quite a small proper combat army. So this is kind of where we got to. There's the Almugavars making a run for that as well, and this was very much, as they jumped out and these guys raced forward, this was very much about what my first round pips were going to be. And luckily this guy got I think he got a 6, giving him 7, giving him 5 different commands. So that allowed me to suddenly reverse these. They're not going to take this against 2 Almugavars. They've got to fall back. This is a big thing. They fell back. This swung out, and it's suddenly, look, we're going to try and close the door here. We're not going to contest this anymore, or try and put people here. This has caught us out a bit. They've caught us out a bit, and let's just, these guys can all inch across. The knights can come over, because again, as has happened in other games, these are going to be needed to reinforce this line against this big attack here and stop these guys coming out of the terrain. And the knights are kind of coming forward. Maybe they should have dismounted, not sure. And suddenly we're trying to concentrate on this thin end of the line and overlap it over there. So yeah, suddenly reforming the defensive line here. These guys have changed their mind again. They're kind of suddenly swinging back to look at this gap. These are ready to try and plug in here and go, well, pike, spear, spear, pike, knight, spear, spear, against a couple of Almugavars. There'll be a lot, and the Lightfoot, there'll be a lot of shooting, and the knights will give them a problem and potentially neutralize them. And then this sort of extending line is now starting to look a lot more difficult for these handful of Albanians and a couple of crossbow cavalry who, this isn't a game for crossbow medium cavalry at all. There's not a space for them, and everything in my army, or nearly everything, is shooting. So they're going to struggle to find a role here. And you can see little green square. The end of this line is starting to suffer the effects of sort of the extension of shooting of my army out to this side. And these mounted guys are suddenly looking a little bit unhappy as well about being targets of mass shooting from that piece in the middle. Slightly blurry shot here. So we kind of pushed up forward to just pour fire. You've got the Lightfoot handgunner supporting 2 longbowmen onto a couple of normal knights. I don't even think they're elite, and they've just been hammered. One of them's gone, one of them's got a hit. They really can't stand up against it, and they can't really charge in because the pikemen are pinning them, other things. The Almugavars are coming forwards and starting to have a go, but you can see they're trying to cover a lot of space here, and they've split up. And what do they fight? Do they fight a pike? Not great. They don't want to be fighting this guy. They want to be in there, but that would be a double overlap. They've got problems, and and there's extra troops here just through sort of weight of numbers, and their light foot, because again of the weight of shooting my army puts out, has been dropping casualties on the enemy pre-combat faster than they can recover them or dish them out backwards, and some of these guys are having to retreat away. So at this end of the line, the Blue Moon infantry are going in, and pikemen, elite spearmen, I'm glad they're not actually fighting, that's great. Against mine, these are red hits. These guys are just collapsing pretty quickly, but they're doing a bit of damage to these pikemen as well. There's a trade-off between men at arms here. My pikemen are not doing quite so well, but it's this overlap has not really worked. But 1, 2, 3, 4 hits on a smaller army and keep those out of the way. Let's see what happens. So the mixed units have broken. They're gone. This is still just about hanging on, but this is now up to 2 hits. You can see a yellow marker there. So this shooting is continuing to blow away just this little unit of 2 knights, and one of the Almugavars has kind of gone. The other one's being occupied by light infantry, who can get away with doing that, leaving these some more shooting chances, and that's allowed these longbowmen to come back into the game, drive through the rough terrain with the Almugavars gone. They're kind of safe as they can be, and start threatening the enemy mounted, the Albanians on this end of the line. Again, you're looking for light horse, medium horse to shoot with longbows, and then actually, whilst this is bad, this stuff, which is quite a lot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 13 out of my 20, 14 out of my 20 are still safe. There's not a lot here actually that's threatening them, and they're doing some damage. So collapsing here is not the end of the world. And once this thing gets shot, which happened pretty imminently, and then this guy goes down and a few hits do on that one, suddenly again this very small army that's taken a bit of damage all the way along the line's got a big hole in it. Suddenly the Condottieri just falls to defeat as well, with smashing through part of it, but the rest of it unable to do much, because partly the 2 Almugavars, the cavalry, none of these things really got a chance to do what they were supposed to do, because this bit of terrain was a little bit too big for them. Cavalry weren't joined up with the Almugavars. The knights couldn't occupy this bit of terrain for too well, and it did leave this strike force sort of slightly isolated. And whilst it probably won out, it just wasn't able to get hold of enough of the rest of the army, whilst the shooting kind of did the business. So that is the end of the 5 games.
This means war.